Welcome to the DNX podcast, the #1 resource for entrepreneurs, nomads, and impact-driven souls. And I am your coach, SILVIA Christman. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with Ashley Hanson, who is the director of the Department of Public Transformation. We met a couple of months ago in the mountains in Eden, and I watched her presentation and her talk about her work with rural America. And I was so inspired that I wanted to have her here on the show. So hi, welcome Ashley.
Hi Sylvia, thanks so much for inviting me onto your show.
Yes, so please tell me and the audience how you got started on working with rural America and became the director of the Department of Public Transformation.
Absolutely. Yeah. In order to do that, I need to back up a little bit just to say that, I'm from a small town originally, and I'm primarily a theater artist and social practice artist. So my work really lives at this intersection of creativity and community. And I saw the Department of Public Transformation really came out of this need that I saw after the 2016 election. So my work is primarily with a theater company that I started about 10 years ago called PlaceBase Productions. We work with small towns around the Midwest of the United States to tell the history, stories, and potential futures of place. And after this election came out and we saw these maps that were being shared on the media and kind of on an international level of just big red blobs with like urban center blue dots, and kind of lumping this idea of rural America into this, Trump country, into a red sea. And having done the work that I've been doing, even being where I'm from, I knew that was a representation of just and creating this like deeper stereotype of what it means to live and work in rural places in this country, and the folks that do live and work in rural places in this country. So I connected with other practitioners, artists, and change makers, and just started talking about this idea. And we all kind of shared this sense of responsibility in trying to kind of bridge this urban-rural divide and some of the misconceptions and myths, really, that are being perpetuated through the media about rural places. So the Department of Public Transformation was born, and it's a national nonprofit that connects, highlights, and supports the work of rural artists and change makers that live in towns of 10,000 or less.
That's incredible. And so how long have you been doing this now? So
after the 2016 election, I bought this little yellow school bus and took off on a trip across the country that I called a mobile artist residency. So I had 4 different female artists join me for different stretches of the trip. And this was really the start, the impetus of the organization. We visited over 120 rural artists over a couple months, and in interviews and just tours of place and seeing their work and connecting about shared challenges and feelings of these kinds of roles and responsibilities that we feel like the art has to play in rural contemporary America. From that, the 5 of us, the artists on the exhibition and myself, created this mobile exhibition. So we, based on our experiences, each created a few different installation pieces that now tours around and kind of helps share some of these stories and ask a lot of questions, facilitate dialogue for our audiences and people who come to visit the exhibition. So that all happened directly after the 2016 election. And then we created this exhibition. It opened in 2017. And then from there, really started developing the organization. So it is less than a year old as an organization, but of course these networks are deep and long, and the trust has been built over many, many years. So it's we were kind of a unorganized collective of people and have just started kind of organizing around this in the last year.
I was so inspired when I watched your presentation. What is the most inspiring encounter that you've had so far?
During these travels, I think I have to say that the thing that has surprised me the most, I'll definitely pull out a few examples, but just overall, maybe not even surprised me, but just that I felt was really reinforced is this, feeling and sentiment that we, as a country, or maybe even throughout the world, kind of lump rural America into one bucket. We kind of call it this like monolith, like a place and it's not like a place you can go, like I'm going to rural America, right? It's like you can visit many rural communities in this country, but they are all so incredibly diverse. And the challenges that folks are facing and the ways in which people are working together to overcome these challenges also share that same sense of diversity. And so, just thinking about like, if you are familiar with rural places in multiple parts of the country, if you think about a border community in Arizona, or a farming community in the Central Valley in California, or in the North Woods in Minnesota, or in coal country in Eastern Kentucky. I mean, just saying those words like conjure up all of these different images. And so I think that was just really reinforced on this journey of just like recognizing how individuals were, all of this work is so place-based, and because it has to be. We're relying on the resources, the social and economic and financial resources of our place to make any of this stuff happen. I mean, it's very underfunded, it's very under-recognized, and very challenging work that folks are doing on a daily basis. And in order to make that happen, they, are very resourceful in finding ways to make connections across differences and to use what we have in our places to make really amazing things happen. One example that I will share is I was visiting with a gentleman named Warren Montoya, who lives in the Santa Ana Pueblo in New Mexico, and he has an organization called Resonate Arts, and is working with young people that live on the reservation near in the Pueblos around Santa Fe, and really cultivating this next generation of Native artists in this really powerful hybrid of mixing contemporary, kind of even more, I guess, traditionally what you would call urban arts, with traditional Native art practices, and really finding that balance of balancing tradition and transformation and progress with preservation, and then cultivating, Native artists and change makers of the future, really based on the history and culture of this place. So, his story, and again, so many others, there's 120 of them that are just incredibly inspiring. And I bring as much of those stories into every room that I walk into, that I can, so that, as we're having these conversations, like I'm thinking about, all of these folks who are doing this work on a daily basis, and the weight and, joy that comes with that.
Yeah. So for anybody that, hasn't been to America or hasn't been into rural America, I'm just trying to, imagine this even for myself, how you actually make this work. So you're taking your little yellow school bus and you're driving cross country on your own in this yellow school bus, and you visit these communities in rural areas. Is that right?
That's part of it, yes. And then another part is doing a lot of digital happy hour hangouts. This work can be very isolating, right, if you're like one of few artists living and working in your town. So finding ways to connect folks, whether it is using technology or we have, Facebook group, things like that. But we also, when we did our initial journey, we invited the artists that we visited to write a handwritten letter to the next stop that we were visiting. So we'd hand deliver these letters. So, and they were these just like letters of encouragement and support and inviting people to come visit. So you might be 300 miles apart, but, you didn't know each other existed, but then you received this, handwritten invitation and a note of encouragement, like, hey, we're here. We're also doing this work. Keep it up, just to kind of keep those fires going and the network strong. The little yellow school bus part of it, yeah, you're right. Sometimes I'm with friends, sometimes I'm on my own. But when I am doing this work, I definitely make the connections in advance. So I do my homework. I make sure that I have a base understanding of what environment that I'm walking into, so I don't ask the wrong question or just don't, so it looks like I've done my homework. You build the trust a little faster. And usually have a host that I'm meeting with, somebody that has either invited me to come or that I've reached out to specifically to connect with them about their work. So there's multi levels to this.
Do you stay and sleep in the yellow school bus?
Yeah, for sure. It's converted. So it's like a little studio apartment, artist studio inside. It's really fun.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, in my mind, I'm romanticizing your journeys. It just sounds so incredible that I want to join you on this tour. I've always wanted to drive cross country in America through very rural areas. And I also know that many people listening to this, they follow sort of the digital nomadic way of living. So many of us, including myself, I've traveled. I mean, I've hitchhiked across South America. I've traveled all around, Southeast Asia and India and, Europe and, which Europe is very developed. So there's very few areas that are really as remote as the places that you'd find in South America or even in the Americas. And I think many people don't know how actually remote and how remote still a lot of these places in the middle of America are. I mean, the continent of the USA is the size of Europe and larger. So, it's not developed. It's not developed to the degree. And the fact that somebody 300 miles away from them wouldn't know each other, to me, is just kind of mind-blowing, and it sounds really exciting, too. I mean, I would love to come on a tour with you in that school bus.
Absolutely. Yeah. As we're developing kind of the next phase of public transformation, looking at how we can start to do more rural-urban exchanges or rural-rural exchanges, to kind of each other learn about each other's place that we're at. And I think especially talking to this audience, as you mentioned, this kind of a lot of nomadic travelers and workers, I think just helping to debunk some of these myths of like the scary small town bar and really encouraging folks to just think about the culture of the place that you are visiting or passing through, and seeing what your role is in that. So if there is an opportunity to patronize a local establishment, if there is an opportunity to sit at a bar and hear a story and like ask enough questions to get to the root of where this person is at and meet them where they're at, it is just a completely a mind-blowing and enriching experience. So, I guess basically to like not be afraid of that and to, and if it helps, like do your homework in advance so you know where you're going and maybe even reaching out to somebody, because it's pretty, in some of these places, as you mentioned, it felt like it was rare to get a visitor. We're so often invited to come to the city for things, for conferences or for, to connect with each other. And so the sheer, the hospitality that was shown just from picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, I would love to come visit you and learn about your work." I mean, it's like the doors were blown open, and that's just kind of the nature, I think, of rural living, is that we love to visit, we love to hang out, we love to sit on the porch and drink lemonade and have conversations, and that still exists very much so, and I think that it's very welcomed if you're willing to do the work of reaching out and asking.
Yeah. Oh, I'd imagine so. I hate to admit it, but I have not traveled across country in the U.S. while I've hitchhiked across South America and Central America, and I stopped by a lot of very rural places and to examine ways of life and cultures I wasn't familiar with. And I think it's so easy to assume that, because the U.S. is a Western civilized country in that sense, that it is the same everywhere, and there's so much to explore in these rural area that I'm curious about. I have a daydream that I will buy a VW bus and just travel across this country to the most remote places where you can get away from civilization, but also see nature and also connect to the local communities. Just like I like sitting with tribes and, tribes in Central or South America, or in, discovering, how indigenous people live in different parts of the world. It's not, it's like I want to come and explore this country in just the same way. And I think it's often so overlooked because it's televised worldwide in a very different way.
Yeah, there's a lot of terminology that's kind of thrown around with when like rural America is blank, and it might be there's just horrible stereotypes. It's just like uncultured or uneducated. These terms that you hear, and dying and struggling, and it's just not at all the reality across the board that I've experienced, right? And so one of the things that I often say is, just because it's not your culture, or it's different than the culture that you expected, doesn't mean that it's not a culture. And in the same way that you might, go and visit in what quote unquote exotic place, it's somebody's home, it's somebody lives there, and there's layers of complex geographic and historical traumas and joys and celebrations. And just, I think we're so fast moving that we don't take the time to really think about like who else has been here before us and who calls this place home, and what is our relationship and responsibility as visitors and tourists and people interacting with places from the outside. And I encourage that same kind of generosity and curiosity and really respect in visiting rural places in the United States that you would give any other place that you visit. I think I'll just leave it at that. But that's one of the things that I feel like we could really use more of is just that compassion of understanding of where people are coming from, so that if we find that where that route is not be aligned with your values, well, first you need to develop that relationship before you can have any hope of helping to shine light on a different perspective or a different way of living.
Yeah, it's very, very important. Yeah, and you really inspire me to go on a road trip. You really do. Maybe I'll just come with you next time you go.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the first to admit it. I've traveled to far, far, far away lands to discover cultures that are different from my own. And I have not really spent the time doing that here. And so, and I think I'm missing out. I'm really missing out on a very important perspective that is also going to greatly influence my opinions of what, forms this country as a whole.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think understanding this work is by nature political, just by talking about it right now in this context in American history. Even though like I don't identify as like a policy person. I'm a theater artist, but the work is political. And I think that whether we're talking about, who somebody voted for or not, just having an understanding of the economics and where people are coming from. I am not giving a pass to folks who are racist or who are inconsiderate of other ways of life or who refuse to acknowledge that the world is changing. Like that, I'm not giving a pass to anyone. But what I'm saying is that, that is a very small minority of Trump voters that I have come in contact with. Like I have to be very, very mindful of that. And it's like a very loud voice, but there are a lot of progressive people that don't show up on those red maps that live in rural places. There are a lot of people that choose not to vote in rural places, and the reason, and a lot of people that can't because of citizenship or having just moved to a place. So just like I think these lumping maps are very damaging and disregard a lot of perspectives and ways of life. and lump, a lot of people into this very, very narrow idea of what we hear in the media. So that's one of the things that I hope, people take away from this conversation and from all the conversations that I give. It's just like, it's not everybody, it's a small, loud voice, but come see for yourself. We welcome you to come and see for yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're also at the end of our time, and I really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom and insights from the Department of Public Transformation. We're also going to post all of the links on how to get in touch with you and where to find you and follow your journey below this podcast. So scroll down, make sure you check it out. And thank you, Ashley, for making the time.
Thank you, Sylvia. I really appreciate it.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your ongoing support. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Please go check out dnxcommunity.com. This is where you'll find the other nomads and evaders of convention. We'll see you there. And if you're interested in our English-speaking events, go and check out dnxglobal.com. You'll find the link below this podcast as well. And if you have time, one last favor, please go to iTunes, look for Sylvia Chrisman or look for the DNX podcast and leave a review. Thank you so much, lovely people, and I'll talk to you next time.